This is Dr. Tillwin, and I'm glad that you could join us today on this journey of recovery from mass shootings. Now that we've looked at the overview of mass shootings and the phenomena itself, now let's get started with the symptoms itself of mass shootings. But before we can continue, I'd like for you to subscribe, like the video if it helped you, and share with others. If you do this, you'll be able to find this channel and we can continue the recovery process together and move forward and live a better life after this tragedy. So let's get started. So the symptoms that you are right now are dealing with, I should have entitled this part, What is Happening to Me? That is what you're probably asking yourself after experiencing this mass shooting. You're asking, this is not me. What is really happening to me? And I'm here to tell you this, that number one, your experiences are normal. These are normal reactions to a traumatic event. Your system has been put in some kind of shock because of what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've experienced. Let me give you one point here for you to know. Some of you who are in the same closet hiding from the gunman will experience that traumatic event completely different and will recover also differently. No two people experience trauma the same way, and no two people will recover in the same way. So somebody can say, well, I've already recovered. That was a month ago. That was last year. I'm over it now. Why can't you be? Because you have your own timetable. The same way with grieving process. Everybody has their own timetable. And that is one thing that you have to know, that this is different, for everybody. So back to what is happening to me, kind of attitude that you have now, your thoughts is that after a traumatic event like this, like the mass shooting, you start now becoming very, very fearful of being in a lot of places. You become very jumpy, suspicious, almost like paranoid really, because you go around and everybody you go see, you want to look at, is that the shooter? Does that look like a shooter? Everybody that if they're wearing the same clothes, the same color, the same type of clothing, some people start to remind you of the shooter, and you're on the lookout always for that person who is a potential shooter, and you're not comfortable even being in public in places that you used to be very safe. There will be time also that you may smell certain things that used to be normal, like food. Like say, for example, if you're running through a cafeteria when the gunman was shooting, now all of a sudden the smell of certain kind of food that you're smelling there now has been associated with danger. So now it takes that smell and the trauma that is happening is put together, so that every time you have that kind of aroma or smell, your body, your mind tells you danger is around the corner. Sudden colors, sudden sensation. If you are in a closet and all of a sudden it was very, very hot there, or it was very cold in there, all that temperature, whether it's cold or hot, is being associated now with danger. So that if it's hot, all of a sudden you start to think about, okay, it's something bad is about to happen, even when it's become very cryptic, kind of way. Some of you were locked in a closet, and after that closed spaces now is associated with danger, because the mind takes the closed spaces and being cramped in there, being huddled in there, it takes that and put together with trauma. And it says that if you're ever in closed spaces, something bad is about to happen to you. There's closed spaces, you become very anxious, you become very nervous about being in one of those places. And for some of you, there were cell phones that were ringing in there. Either family members calling, people that they knew, friends calling, and all these phones that were ringing, or you were trying to use one to call your loved one. And now phones themselves, just the sight of a phone, a cell phone, becomes a trigger now, becomes something that reminds you of a trauma. The sound of different dial tones or the ringing of the phones becomes a trigger now, because that's when the phones were ringing, when the gunshots were sounding and the gunman was busy going around shooting people. Or if you happen to be in a place where you're a victim of gun violence and this was happening, this is now being associated with gun violence or mass shootings. And then you now are now avoiding all these places, people, things that remind you of your traumatic events. Now, some of you, all of a sudden, you have these nightmares that are so vivid, they are so real, and it could be about the gunman, and it could be about other terrifying. They all come from the same place. You might find yourself having a dream where you're just falling and falling and falling and falling and can't hit the ground, or that some wild animals are chasing you and they're about to eat you up alive, or anything very terrifying is associated with trauma. So when you ask what is happening to me, this is what is happening to you, then you may start to blame yourself for what has happened. You feel somehow you are responsible for what was going on. So then you become very angry about what happened. You start to become very, very depressed, to where now you can't even leave the house. You isolate, because anger and depression go together. You're isolating and you're being very, very irritable. And people wondering what's going on with you. Why can't you come out, go somewhere, do something? And you say, just leave me alone. You find consolation in just hiding and being in a house where you don't have to be with anybody else, and somehow you feel safe. But this is a path where you don't want to keep this down too much, because you become isolated, and this becomes a very bad thing, because now you become paralyzed in your social life, where you don't go out, you don't do anything. Your work, you can't even go to work and actually function on the job, because you are afraid that the next person will be the gunman coming over there to shoot up the place. You find that even going to class is now a chore. When you go in and you look at the places where you are running, places where the gunman was standing, closets in which you might have been hiding, this all it becomes a place where now you're angry about it, you're depressed about it, and it takes you back to that place again, and you can't really go. You don't care about going to school anymore. You don't care about going to church anymore because of the crowds of people that are there, because now all of a sudden crowds of people bother you. You might be sitting there and loud noises all of a sudden, maybe it's a balloon, maybe it's a car backfiring, or any kind of loud noise, all of a sudden it takes you right back. And you act and feel as though you are right there in that closet again, or you're running in the hallway, or you're running in the parking lot with law enforcement everywhere. But now you almost have a break from reality. But you're really not there really. But it's just that has triggered that memory where your memories of trauma has been stored. It has accessed that, and all of a sudden you are acting and feeling as though it's happening again. That kind of flashback can be very terrifying, because most people are not in control of themselves when they have a flashback like that. And so this is what is happening to you right now, whether you have anger, depression, suspicious of people, nightmares. So with all this that is happening, becomes very difficult for you to function. So we're going to go to the next session and look at recovery when you're dealing with aftermath of the mass shootings, because of all the psychological and physical and emotional symptoms that you're having. So join me in the next section. So now that we have finished the symptoms, the third section now is about recovery. This is where we look at what does it take to recover from the trauma of mass shootings. But before we do that, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe, share, and like the video so that we can all join in the recovery process. This is Dr. Tilwan signing off, wishing you the blessings of today and wonderful possibilities of tomorrow, and recovery and empowerment as we move along.